Thank you so much, Christine, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me here, Sandhya.
I think maybe we can start with a question on responsible investing. As climate change and sustainability have become such big concerns worldwide, more and more investors have been called on to invest responsibly. So, in your view, does investing in companies with purpose necessarily come at a cost of profit?
I think there's always a perception that if we have to invest responsibly, there are many considerations, and therefore, somewhere along the line, we have to give up performance. But I think that this is a very isolated way of thinking, because responsible investment, at least to me, I did my PhD on the topic 20 odd years ago when pretty much there wasn't really a concept as such. I feel that in order for investment to be purposeful and with the ability to find the best opportunities, a problem-solving approach to investing is extremely important, right? So, for example, in Asia, we know that climate transition is important, but also climate adaptation, because there are certain situations where we are already seeing the human impact of extreme weather, and as a result of that, finding solutions to immediate as well as long-term oriented problems is a must. So if there is a need, then providing the right solutions should present the best investment opportunities there.
I really like your framing of it as a problem-solving approach. So to that end, do you think divestment falls under this idea of problem-solving, or would you say that it should be more of engagement? Because a lot of companies nowadays tend to divest. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not an either-or situation, and I think that a general conversation around should it be divestment, should it be engagement, tends to frame things as a yes or a no, 0 and 1. But when we are constructing a portfolio, investment portfolio, or making investment decisions, there are actually many different possibilities, and it also depends on the asset class. So, for example, in fixed income investment, if we have some concerns about a particular issuer, it is possible to limit the exposure at the point in time and into the future. But there's also an element of committing to not adding exposure to an existing issuer because of the risks that we perceive as amplifying. So between divesting and investing, there's actually many possibilities. And going on to problem solving, I certainly support engagement, because if you divest, you actually do not have a say or do not really have a relationship with a company anymore. So if we really want to drive change, having a conversation around the issues that we identify and try to find a common understanding in knowing what would be the possible solutions and working through those possibilities would probably be a better approach, a more impactful approach. But of course, there are asset owners and investors out there who decide that they do not want certain exposure and therefore decide to divest. But this is very much based on the investment policy and the risk appetite of a particular investor.
So in your experience, have you seen what these conversations with companies have looked like in terms of engagement? How long might it take, or what are some challenges that they may face?
Sure. I've been engaging with companies for many years to drive change. And sometimes it's not just about engaging with companies. Understanding what is possible for or within the capacity of a company to change is probably the first step. Because impactful engagement is not going to be possible unless we demonstrate understanding of what is within the control of a company and what is outside of its control. And what, as investors, are doing to help them understand the whole ecosystem and where the pain points and bottlenecks are. And with that understanding, then we can focus on not only the risks of sustainability, but also what are the possibilities and the opportunities. And that brings the engagement conversation to a whole new different level, because we are working towards the same goal in finding solutions instead of putting blame on issues that have gone wrong, very backward looking. We should always engage with a forward-looking manner positive, finding possibilities, and that's where trust gets built. And collaboration gets built. Of course, sometimes it doesn't mean that we have no difficult conversation. Of course, we have difficult conversations as well. But being able to put a positive lens as an overlay would ensure a good long-term rapport, overcoming these issues together.
How much would you say these engagement conversations are influenced by the investors' values?
Not just values, but also we have our fiduciary duty to focus on performance of companies. So a lot of the conversations would be values driven, but what we look at, the KPIs would of course touch on the bottom line as well. And sometimes it's not apparent in the short term, so taking the time frame into consideration and work out what might be the best possible solutions is important. You also asked earlier about the time frame. I think in general, a meaningful change, for example, a board reorganization, it might take years. But if we're looking at certain issues that are already seeing a wave of change in the industry. So I remember, for example, back in 2017, asking a company to disclose their Scope 3 emissions, it was almost like, oh, that's not possible. No data, or we don't have the transparency, that level of transparency in the supply chain. But look at where we are now. It's almost an expectation, depending on which markets you are talking about. So expectations do change, and to be able to engage effectively is, as I said earlier, mapping out the ecosystem, talking to issuers, talking to standard setters, and on that front, being part of an organization such as ICGN that focuses on policy engagement really helps investors to bring together all the different tools that we have for effective engagement.
Thank you so much for sharing.
You're very welcome.
Maybe now we can shift track a little bit. I know you've done a lot of work on AI as well, and we all know that AI has recently come onto the scene and changed everything, probably permanently. And while regulation and governance is slowly catching up, what role do you think ethics has to play?
Ethics is a very complex topic because it is in relation to values, which could be deeply personal, but also behavior. Even if we have similar values, the recommendation on how we should behave could be different. So the topic on, initially I called it responsible AI and data governance. That was the first, the investor expectations on this topic was first published in 2019. And since then, the whole industry has been working on different aspects and derivative versions of these topics. So, for example, it could be about AI applications in financial services in certain sector, or it could be about digital inclusion, so very much from the impact and inclusion perspective. I think that ethical AI, as we see nowadays, the most relevant would be how generative AI could create, because generative by definition is you make things up,
yes.
Right? You create something. So how can we identify what has a firm foundation on facts? What are opinions that are based on facts, or what are just opinions based on whatever I want to say? And on that, technology is getting more and more sophisticated, and to be able to create an ethical framework around it is not easy. But thankfully, there have been a lot of principles and foundational work that has been done by governments and also investors already. So we should really leverage on them and think about at a use case level, but not at a technology level, what is appropriate, transparent, and have a clear accountability system. That's work, start off with those principles, and then onto use case specifics. Then I think we'll be building on a strong foundation.
So now as companies and their employees start to use this technology, what do you think they should take note of if they want to use it in a way that is ethical or responsible?
Well, first of all, I think as an employee, we need to observe whether it is within company policy to use it. Extremely important, compliance and following the company guidance. There are many possibilities on a personal level, but understanding what are the shortcomings of generative AI is important. For example, it does make things up, checking facts, triangulating information. Don't just trace one source, because a Gen AI could have used the same source multiple times, and as we know that if you say things 100 times, it could become true.
Yeah.
So having diverse checking data sources is important. And Gen AI is also helpful with productivity if we use the right prompt. Being intelligent and having the critical mind in creating the right prompts could actually make a very productive use of an AI and human collaboration.
Yeah, definitely. But what about for companies? At the company level, as they see their own employees using it, or maybe if the company would like to harness this technology in their own work, how do you think they could start using this technology?
There are a few ways of looking at it. I think that in a conceptual level, first of all, understanding what type of foundational models are being used and what kind of third party has been brought in to support that. Because there are very few companies now, they are building the model from scratch, even starting getting a foundational model off the shelf. So first of all, understanding who has been vetting the product. Do they have the right capabilities and understanding is the first step. Secondly, many sectors and industry have already started introducing some standards. They are soft law, they're not hard law. Sector-based and industry-based expectations as well as guidances need to be observed. Certain users will have a higher risk than others, especially when it relates to external customers or when it involves retail rather than institutions. And at the third level would be the last mile delivery, understanding who is involved in delivering that, what might be the implications. So if Gen AI is used in conversation with retail investors or retail customers, that is, for me, that's a much bigger risk than using Gen AI to, for example, summarize your own meeting notes, because you are owning, it's very clear that you are owning that responsibility. But when there's a third-party interaction, especially when it involves customers, and especially if they are sort of retail, everyday citizen out there, extreme care must be taken.
Thank you for that. That was very comprehensive.
Thank you.
Last question. What are some values that have shaped you as a leader?
When I started having an interest in responsible and sustainable and impact investing, it wasn't as popular as it is now. And I guess helping and supporting each other in seeing the different aspects, different versions and different solutions that will lead to better outcomes have really shaped my career, but also in supporting the growth of the industry. So being a service leader, I think is what really helps me to learn, to know that I can always learn from someone. I think it is a Chinese saying that in a group of three, you will always find your own teacher. And I see that all the time. And it is not about experience or age, it's about different perspectives. Because there are obviously things that I do not know, because maybe I've been in this industry for some time and others might have changed career. And those are really new perspectives, and having an open mind has really helped me to see things in different light and keeping it fresh and interesting.
So over the course of your career, do you feel that this way of thinking has gotten stronger?
Yes, I think so, and people are more aware of the need to have diverse perspective, to be inclusive. But in order to take it to the next stage, we need to practice it.
Yes.
Above and beyond talking about it.
Yes, that's very true. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.